Living Corporate is brought to you by Canaries. Let me tell you about Canaries. Canaries is a tech company formed in 2018 by Black founders who experienced inequities in the corporate world like most of us in the workplace. They saw typical diversity initiatives, but knew that to create systemic change, diversity, equity, and inclusion needed to be done differently. They're still ahead of the curve, focusing on the E and the I using a data-driven approach. Think canary in the coal mine. The name is a nod to the canaries coal miners used to bring into mines to determine if the work environment was safe or undesirable. That's what they do for companies. They help you find the folks you need to listen to, the canaries, who will help you diagnose, measure, and attack your DEI challenges. Canaries has your back. Check them out at www.canaries.com/employer. That's www.canaries.com/employer. Living Corporate is brought to you by Black Men in Tech. Black Men in Tech's mission is to elevate the voice of Black men in the technology space by offering year-round engagement opportunities and philanthropic contributions for people in the Black community, the neighborhood. In the tech industry, Black men regularly struggle to access networking and career advancement opportunities. At Black Men in Tech 2021, they are partnering with their allies to create a safer space where Black men can share their experiences authentically. Through this effort, Black Men in Tech hopes to share knowledge that can be used by Black attendees to overcome race-based obstacles, while also offering non-Black allies the chance to learn how they can be more supportive of their melanated colleagues. To learn more about the Black Men in Tech conference that will be happening on June 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, check them out at blackmenintech.com. That's BLKMENINTECH.com. Black Men in Tech. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and, recording this the weekend after Derek Chauvin, after his sentencing of 22 and a half years. It's interesting. I think it's important, and it's also possible to hold many different emotions and hold space for people who are in different places with the news of this sentencing. On one hand, you have folks who are saying this is police accountability. This is more years than what could the historical range of these charges. And there are other folks who say, hey, look, this isn't enough, right? Like, he should have gotten life in prison. He shouldn't, with no parole. He should never see the light of day again. And I think it's important to honor and respect the fact that both of those realities can exist simultaneously. And I also believe it's important for all of us to push our collective imagination of what justice and what accountability means. And then I also, when it comes to imagination, it takes imagination to challenge systems, because systems are big and complex by design. So when I think about the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, and when people say, well, he got more years than the average for these charges, and my response is, those charges and the range of those charges didn't fit what Derek Chauvin did, right? But again, when we start talking about, well, it's beyond the range of a charge and this law and that law, what we're describing is a system, right? And the uncomfortable truth is that Black and brown folks go to jail much longer for crimes that don't even involve harming people, let alone killing people. And so we don't have to, nor do we owe anyone, calm, respectable responses to injustices, to trauma, to institutional harm, right? We don't. And when you think about this whole concept of reimagining systems, and to reimagine a system, first off, you have to reject the current system, right? And that's scary for people. I get that. It's scary to reject systems, because it's like, well, then what do we have? How do things work? But it's okay. It's really healthy. We look at the world that we're in, and so much of it is fundamentally broken. So it's more than healthy and reasonable to reject systems. It is. It's interesting because today's guest, he is an author, an activist, a father, a husband, a rapper, a speaker, an educator, a mentor to several people. And frankly, I was a fan. I am a fan. I was like a super fan coming up, and I told him as much. His name is Propaganda. For those who don't know, Propaganda, he just wrote a book actually called Terraform. And so we talk about the book. We talk about the concept of terraforming. What does that mean? We talk about creating impact and change. And we talk a lot about systems. I'm excited for y'all to hear this interview. But before we do that, we're going to tap in with Tristan. I'm going to see you in a minute.
What's going on, Living Corporate? It's Tristan, and I want to thank you for tapping back in with me as I provide some tips and advice for professionals. Today, let's discuss how you can politely say no at work. We've all been there, where we wanted to say no to coworkers and sometimes even our bosses, but we aren't sure how to phrase it. Being able to say no is a skill that you must master to achieve success at work. There are times when you have to set boundaries to focus on the workload you currently have instead of piling on more. Erica Pierce, Millennial Leadership Coach at the Millennial Boardroom, provided 4 great ways to politely say no in a recent email that I wanted to share with you all. First, thank you, but I'm not taking anything else on right now. By starting with thank you, you're being nice and respectful. The second part of that statement implies that you've already got your hands full, which explains why you cannot take on the request. Lastly, by saying right now, you're letting them know that it's not because you can't do the task, but you need to prioritize your time. Second, I'm not able to commit to that right now. While this statement communicates the same thing as the previous point, it's a bit more firm in its phrasing. You can follow up this statement with a very brief explanation of why you feel you have to say no, but be careful not to get into over-explaining. Third, unfortunately, it's not a good time. By saying unfortunately in this statement, it acknowledges that the task presented to you is important and that you empathize with your coworker. Here, you can follow up with an alternative option or something like, I'll let you know if I can help as soon as I'm done with this task. Lastly, thank you for thinking of me. I really wish I could. This statement is a bit more enthusiastic than the others, but still communicates that you know your limits. This helps your coworker or boss not feel as bad for having their request rejected. Look, I understand saying no at work can be uncomfortable. Believe me, that's a common problem in the workplace. But by using these phrases, the people you work with will understand if you can't do something at the moment, and likely they won't hold it against you. Check out more on Erica Pierce at www.themillennialboardroom.com. Thanks for tapping in with me today. Don't forget, I'm now taking submissions from you all on career questions, issues, concerns, or advice you think may help others. So make sure to submit yours at bit.ly/tapintristan. This tip was brought to you by Tristan of Layfield Resume Consulting. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Layfield Resume, or connect with me, Tristan Layfield, on LinkedIn.
At Living Corporate, we often talk about how we as Black folks show up at work and how these corporate power structures impact how we show up. But we know when work ends, we come home, log off, and have to show up at home for our families and communities. And as a Black man, I often turn to Let's Talk Bruh for the real, honest, and healing conversations on Black masculinity, mental health, and patriarchy. Let's Talk Bruh, or LTB, is a platform that creates content around Black masculinity and the impact of patriarchy in Black communities. In other words, Let's Talk Bruh is having real conversations that Black men need to hear and be a part of. Let's Talk Bruh creates interactive, healing, and learning experiences with Black men and male socialized folks of all sexual orientations and gender identities. Through their content and community-based programs, Let's Talk Bruh seeks to reduce patriarchal violence in our community and provide support to those most impacted by patriarchal violence, specifically Black women, girls, femmes, queer, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. Tap in at letstalkbruh.com. To be clear, that's letstalkbruh.com. So brothers, what are you waiting for? Let's talk, bruh. Prop, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, homie. Can't complain.
Man, it's a blessing to have you here. Look, I'm connecting to you because of this book, Terraform, Building a Better World.
Yeah.
I really want to understand, man. Like, I think, like, especially in this space, this Christian space, you exist in a lot of different places at the same time as a musician,
Yeah.
as an activist, as an educator. Like, what led you to write Terraform?
Man, I think ultimately it's like finding a way to, like you said, like I exist in so many different spaces, finding a way to like create a sort of a universe for myself. I was asked at some point by my management, like, hey, what do you want to talk about for the next 10 years? And I was like,
Mm,
sheesh, 10 years? Uh, this better be a pretty big concept or like really core to who I am. So I thought about like, well, yeah, I think I'm really all that I do, like you said, like activism, my faith, poetry, it's all about sort of the structure and formation of culture. So that became like, all right, so what do I think about it? You know what I mean? And that's where I came across the term terraform, which it's science fiction word about when you find a distant planet and the process of making that
yeah,
planet livable is called terraforming. So I was like, yeah, that's making culture. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But yeah,
It's interesting, right? Like, so your background, like you're the son of a Black
yeah.
Panther. I think about like this current space of like white evangelicalism, and like you've never really fit like
Oh no.
into like the
Yeah.
respectability folks they expect,
Mhm.
right? And like like you've had like I remember because I was like I was like we were talking about off mic is I remember like when I first saw you, I was like, dog, is this dude looks like grimy, like in a good way. Like he's like this the streets,
Yeah,
like for
yeah.
real.
He a little different. Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
different, right? And especially like I want to say because I don't want to get too nerdy, but shoot, this is
Yeah,
my
let's
podcast.
go.
I'm
It's your
grateful. So
pod.
so here's the thing, right? Like there was like this era, right? Like so you think about like cross movement.
Yeah,
Cross movement was like so even like cross movement, soul fruit. I'll even pull them up. Like they everything kind of existed in this, and I know soul fruit wasn't hip hop, but it's like everything existed like in these very like I don't know defined boxes of like
yeah,
what black music, even hip hop, like cross movement was street, and like they of course are like the godfathers of so much of this
yeah,
stuff, but like they weren't rocking up with like dreads and like
yeah,
like it just that wasn't the
yeah,
vibe. Like boys had edge
yeah.
ups and like they looked good, like
It
they
was clean
looked
cut brothers.
whatever.
Yeah.
They were clean cut, so they were even acceptable. They even fit within like the norms of what perhaps like your white evangelical would expect of a quote unquote
Yeah,
rapper. Whereas like you show up and like you're coming up in this space and you've been like historically fervent and like
yeah.
consistent in your position on like white supremacy, like before it was like hyper
Absolutely.
trendy.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Like talk to me about what informed Precious Puritans and
yeah,
like the work like talk to me about that, and then talk to me about like just how that's even informed how you interpret like and navigate the current
yeah,
evangelical landscape today.
yeah. That's a great question, man. I think, you bring up cross movement. It's like, so my prehistory is I was sort of the last wave of a group called Tunnel Rats. And that was my first group. So I came up in this sort of West Coast scene. Obviously, this is like before the internet ran everything. So, if you to know what was going on in Philly or in the South, you had to go there. You know what I'm saying? Like we didn't we didn't know what was going on over there, So we just knew out here you had Tunnel Rats, you had people like Pigeon John and LA Symphony, dudes like Abstract Rude, who were all a part of this scene who we knew were Christians, you know what I'm saying? But we were all at the same events. We all battled, we all freestyled, we all were at the open mics, so our scene was one for which, because it was like, since it's not New York, since it's not Philly, we were so passionate about building a hip hop scene here, that there was such a camaraderie about, man, you from the coast. So no matter what God you you worshiping on Sunday, like we ride for you because you're from the coast. You know what I'm saying? So we had this sort of like we're a part of the scene kind of attitude, you know. And then you come across people like Cross Movement and what was going on over there, which was much more influenced by like the 5%ers and the Nation of Islam, where they were
Right.
so much more, you had to be so much more militant. I'm saying this now, you know, in retrospect, but at the time, like we didn't know what we were
Right.
doing, you know what I'm saying? So I was just like my OGs. My OGs were LPG, were Tunnel Rats. Like I was just like them. So like I was like, I'm ahead. I'm a B-boy. You know what I'm saying? Like I came from
Right.
graffiti. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, we're B-boys. And then so when you meet somebody that you thought was like at the time, like, well, y'all look like heads, you know what I'm saying? You look like it, you know what I'm saying? But
Right.
they had so many parameters around what it was supposed to look like as a Christian rapper that we just didn't have where we were.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
and now, like I said, in retrospect, I understand it's because they were coming from this, like I said, this super militant East Coast world where if you look back at a Wu-Tang
Yeah.
record, it's like, this is 5% apologetics. Like that's what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I
Facts.
didn't know
Yes.
that. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, it's just hip hop. Like, okay, poor righteous teachers, they're Muslims. Cool. I love them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you just don't,
Right.
you know,
Right.
native tongue, the Muslims. All right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, so, you know, we just
Word.
didn't consider it. So I think that like I came into a scene thinking that, you know, in my own naive way, like hip hop was hip hop and that everyone thought like we did. So, you know, I once I found out that that was not the case, I felt as though, well, I'm gonna stay true. Like I'm just gonna be who I am, and I know there's a crowd for this. If y'all never accept me, I mean, this ain't even like again. I was such a backpacker. I was like, this ain't even hip hop. Like, what I what I care if this church want to book me or not. Like, you know what I'm saying? This ain't
Right.
hip hop. You feel me? So I didn't. I had an attitude of like, if you want to talk scripture, if you want to talk apologetics, like let's go there. You know what I'm saying? Because I am a Christian and I
Right.
do believe in the scriptures. You know what I'm saying? But you ain't never asked me. You
Right.
know what I'm
Right.
saying? So like that, but if you want to talk about it, like, yes, I have a reason for why I do what I do. And I don't understand why
Right.
you need a chapter and verse for it. Like, I just don't understand what you don't understand. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm.
I think that was kind of
Mhm.
my stance. So then with the Precious Puritans thing was when we started like getting a little notoriety and I started traveling more, not necessarily in the Christian music circuit, but in the conference circuit because our
Yeah.
music was so cerebral. You know what I'm saying? Like, so because of that, like I was getting brought into these like, you know, they were evangelical, but they were conferences. These were adults, you know.
Right.
So as I'm doing this, I'm just sitting in the back. And again, like you said, I'm a son of a Panther. And I'm listening to these preachers like just pontificate about how amazing the Puritans were. And I was looking around in the room like, is anyone gonna, am I the only one that there's no way none of y'all know this, you know? And I was just, and
Right.
I was just befuddled. And then after I was befuddled, I was like frustrated. I was angry. And
Right.
then finally I was like, then I was self-reflective because again, I'm a believer. So I was like, you know, are they any different than I am? And I'm like, nah, they're flawed individuals. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, dang, this will make a really dope poem. So that's where it came from, you know. But I think that like ultimately when you come in as an outsider and it's one of those things to where it was like, I didn't think I was until y'all told me I was. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
It
so
does.
that was my interaction with white evangelicalism because I didn't come from that. We come from like Black and Latino inner city churches and we're Californians. So we weren't a part of that. But we thought we served the
Mm.
same God. So when we walked in,
Mm.
it was bizarre. We were like, wait, what? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it was just more like, oh, so okay, word, this is different. Now I know. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So it was kind of like,
Right.
all right, cool.
Right.
Well, it's like you drew the fence. Yeah, I'm like, y'all drew the line in the sand. I didn't. You did. So if
100%.
that's the case, then I'm like, all right, well, then I'm just not gonna be concerned about you, you know? And but if I have your ear, like if I'm still getting gigs like Catalyst and you know what I'm saying, if I'm still getting these like conference gigs where I'm full of these white people, I'm gonna give them the business. Like, you booked me. I only have my work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I only have my poem.
I can't do. I don't
yeah,
have.
I only have my work, so I'm gonna perform my work. You know.
It's interesting, man, because I remember. So I remember when Precious Puritans dropped, and like, this was when I was still subscribed to doggone Gospel Coalition. I was heavy in Gospel Coalition at the time. Very, you know what I'm saying? I was all about it. And I just remember people like really debating the value of the work. Like, talk to me about like the personal conversations that you had with folks of your of our pigmentation, with folks, with people who call themselves allies. Like, what was the fault? Because it was a fallout. Like, I don't feel like I'm
No, it
being
was a fallout.
hyperbolic. Like, I feel
It was definitely a
like
fallout.
talk to me about how that.
It was funny. I'll be honest with you. It was funny because if you know our history. So Humble Beast, like, that's Odd Thomas and Braille, them the whitest white boys.
Dog,
You know what I'm saying? And
yes. And they got bars for you too.
yes, and they got bars. So they were like, we recorded the song. They're like, we recorded the song. You're absolutely right. These people don't. First of all, they don't understand poetry, right? Because if you understood poetry, you would understand that there's multiple points happening here, and that you're holding yourself at just as much fault as the Puritans. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the part that, like, I was finding peace in the fact that I'm like, okay, so you don't understand poetry, and clearly you're convicted. So there's like two things happening. You know what I mean?
Big conviction.
Yeah, it's conviction, and you don't know what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Because any of your defenses were saying, and they jumped to my defense. They were like, when fools are like, what is the actual problem? Do we not venerate the Puritans? And they're like, we're just afraid that young people will not read them. And they're like, is that key to their salvation, whether they read the Puritans or not?
Yeah, it's like, do
you have to? Do you have to read the Puritans? Right? And then things like the Gospel Coalition making statements like, man, there was really no visible sin in their life. And we're going, word, you really believe that there was a moment in the body that we actually became sinless?
Because what does that say about your
what does that say about your theology first? Right. Let me first set aside the fact that slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, was happening right now. Let me set that aside right now. Do you really think it's possible?
Right.
What are you, Nazarene? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're going to get to sinless. You're going to live a moment of sin. And you saying this entire swath of the body did that. Okay, word. So you got an idol. You know what I'm saying? It was just so clear. Right. So that was like our inner conversation where it was like, bro, you good. And the beauty of like the people that were experts in Puritans were like, we were waiting for somebody to say this. We don't understand why nobody else. I don't understand why nobody else didn't bring this up. We know this, you know. And then Pastor Tabiti wrote like a 12-point diatribe, this like blog of like, okay, y'all got an issue? Let me talk about it. And I was like, so after that, because my attitude was like, again, I'm an MC. I was like, I said what I said.
Right.
I don't understand. What do you want me to add to it? You want to do an interview about, at the time, I was like, all I'm going to do is repeat the lyrics. There's nothing else to add. I said what I needed to say. What did you mean when you said? I said what I meant. I don't understand. What did you talk about? There. Like, you know, so to me at the time, I was like, I don't got nothing to add because I said what I meant. Right. And then Tabiti answered it, and I was like, I defer to his answer because it was so perfect. And it was flawless. And it was like, and for me, I'm like, I don't got time for this. And I'm like, y'all don't understand poetry. I was like, you don't understand the genre. So I'm like, I don't even know where to start with you. And they were like, well, then why did you spend so much time talking or tearing down the Puritans and only one line about yourself? And I'm like, okay, so because, okay, have you seen a movie? Like, it's the reveal. Like, I'm building up to the reveal. Like, what? Okay, so you don't, all right. I just don't.
It's poetry.
It's poetry. Again, it's art, I'm like, all right, you don't understand poetry. And at the time, you know, in that particular space, that's true. Like, there wasn't any P4CM. There wasn't any Poets in Autumn. There wasn't any of that. It was me. Right. You know what I'm saying? So So I
Right.
understand y'all don't understand poetry, but you don't understand poetry. So whatever, you know.
It's wild because so in the song Misconception on Church Clothes, which was like so revolutionary at the time as a mixtape, even though Show Baraka did the same thing like the year before that, but it's
Totally
cool.
did. Yes.
And hold on, real quick. So what is up, man? Like, what is up with that? Like Show Barack, I feel like, and look, I'm getting my nerd on because I've all these conversations I've had with my mans, and I was like, if I ever sit down and talk to propaganda, I'm gonna ask. Show Baraka did he had the exact same blueprint. Now it wasn't as sexy, but it was the same thing.
Yeah. You have to remember, like, really what Lecrae meant to that world. Like, he was their baby. So it's just,
Yeah.
he just meant so much. Show is much less approachable. He's too rough around the edges. But I think ultimately the answer is something that my man Merce said. He told me this once. He was like, man,
Mm,
you can't ride a wave if you're ahead of it or if you're creating it. Like, you
mm,
can't ride the wave because you created the wave. So that's the thing about people like Show, and I think in some ways myself, but specifically Show, he's ahead of the curve always. So because of that, he
yeah.
can't ever ride it because he's ahead of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
that's just it's one of those things to where it's like, I don't know when he'll ever get his flowers, except for people that get it, you know what I'm saying? Because he's ahead of the curve.
Right. Right.
He's ahead of the curve.
Man, when I tell you, because I was like, because then after that, I want to, like, So We Live as Kings dropped, some
Yeah.
other stuff continued to like that. A wave happened to your
Yeah.
whole point. Like,
He was just above it. And like I said, like, we connected when we first connected, it was like this weird, like, twinsy kind of thing. One, because he's from Cali, like, we're from a pretty similar space. And the fact that, like, so many times, although we are very very distinct in our personalities, there's a lot of us that's very similar. And how often when we put out lyrics or put out work, we like text each other where it was just like, you beat me to it. I was gonna say that. And you don't even know it's already written. And he'll be in the same thing, like, man, I can't believe you put that. Like, so Gentrify, Precious Puritans, he was like, dog,
yes,
you beat me to it. You know what I'm saying? And then with him with the Talented 10th, and when he did
yes,
yeah, so there were certain songs on his record where I was just like, oh my God, dog, you just beat me to it, bro. Like, I was thinking the same thing, dude. Yeah.
that's so dope, man. So like, it's interesting. Like in this song, going back to this song Misconception. Like, so you kick off your verse. You say, "Slang came from a land where they suffer from the effects of depravity, like gang banging and earthquakes." And I want to get back to this, man, this idea of like terraforming. Like you frankly, like you've been really talking about terraforming. There's been a meta narrative of
Yeah.
terraformation in your content for the past,
Yeah, the
15
whole time.
years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Like talk to me about like what does that practically look like and mean today? And shoot, you know what? I'm gonna be greedy. I didn't get to ask the follow-up question, which is all the stuff around precious Puritans and the commentary, white evangelicalism. Like, talk to me about like your view of like white evangelicalism today after Trump, after the insurrection. Like, bring all that together for me too.
Man, so I'll answer the last question first. Obviously, it's an identity crisis. I think that there were, it's hard to say about an entire group of individuals, a statement about them all. But I think as a concept or as an institution, it's defined itself. And there are those that are inside of it that find themselves like so far down a cave that they're like, I don't know my way out. Like, this is not what I signed up for. So I think that there's definitely a fraction of white evangelicalism that was like, I came for Jesus. Like, I didn't know I had this baggage. I didn't know it had this history, which of course is a product of privilege. But I think that there's a reckoning and a line that was drawn in the sand when your leadership told you, here's the situation. This is how we vote, and this is our guy. You're either in or you're out. So it was almost similar to like my experience where it was like they drew the line in the sand and you had to decide, are you in or are you out? And I think that they made it
Right.
very clear that we are siding with the extreme among us. And you have revealed that you're deeply racist, you know what I'm saying? And deeply married to the status quo and want that to continue. So it left your average person sitting on the pews with an ultimatum to be like, if I'm getting out, what's my alternative? And I think if I'm going to put my brain in the mind of the white evangelical, that's the question. It's like, but where do I go then? You know what I'm saying? So I'm doing this to be as gracious as possible to him. You know what I'm saying? Because at the same time, I'm just like, it's a voter block. Like, I'm like, white evangelical is a voter block. It's not a faith. It's a voter block. You know what I'm saying? And they brains been cooked by QAnon, and it's like, just let it go. It's not worth saving. I don't, just forget it. They've made their choice. The boat's sinking. You know what I'm saying? But I do think we are in a season where, yeah, like what we mean by evangelical, what our denominations are, they've been thrown in the air, and it's gonna be redefined. I think it's in the same way of like, if you're following our political parties in America, it's like, this is not sustainable. What we're in right now, this death spiral of partisanism, it's just, anybody who studied history, you're like, oh, this isn't sustainable. No, a nation can't withstand this. Parties can't withstand
Right.
it. It's going to fracture into something else. I just don't know what that something else is. So I think that that's the same with evangelicalism. It's like, specifically white evangelicalism, it'll become something else, or they'll develop a civil war, and the civil war in America will be white evangelicals against the rest of us, because they have just put their
Yeah.
feet in the
Yeah.
sand, and they're like,
Deeply, man.
yes, this is the plan of God for this nation. And God's imagination does not have space for y'all.
Right. It's so scary, man.
Yeah, it's scary. And it's also like, in the idea of like, as a longer view of history, it's like, well, it's Anabaptists. It's, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's Puritans. It's like, they disappear. You know what I'm saying? Like, denominations disappear. It happens all the time. It's happened all through history. You just don't know until after. So part of me is like, y'all on your way out and you just don't know it. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what you're going to become, but what you doing is like, this is some antebellum, like you holding on to something that's just not sustainable, and you slowly losing power. Now, and maybe you don't know you in a death spiral, but you clearly in a death spiral. Unless you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Unless you either you abandon ship or you course correct. I just don't know what to tell you. It just don't sound like you're gonna course correct, because that whiteness is too important to you.
Yeah, man. So when I think about your book, I think about like the work you're doing now. Like, what does it look like in this moment? I know you're saying it's not sustainable, and I
Yeah.
agree with you. But so what does terraforming look like in this context today?
It means start over. It's exactly what it means. It's like you're looking around at your space, whether it's your church space, your community space, your personal space, your geopolitical space, partisan space, and you're like, this is not serving us. So we need to remember that where we've gotten to was just us. We imagined this, we built it, and now we're in it, which means we could tear it down and rebuild something else. But it takes, like I keep going back to, like this idea of having a little bit of a lot of bit of prophetic imagination, like imagine something better, imagine something different that serves more, that is more life-giving, that is more Christ-like, you know what I mean? So in the space of this white evangelical, it's like, you can't somehow, the religious right movement, the Phyllis Schlafly's of the world, the Jerry Falwell Sr., the senior of the world, that created what you see as a white evangelical as we know it out of the clear blue sky. They made it up. You know what I'm saying? All of the talking points, all of the political points, the way that church is done, like they made it up. You know what I'm saying? So since they made it up out of just the clear blue, then you could say right now it's like, but y'all can't imagine something else. You can't imagine before that, clearly. Therefore, now you can't imagine after that.
Word.
So what I'm saying is like, it's going to take a second to like imagine something else. What is this? Like, what is it possible? Like, I say this as just as a point of interest. It's like abortion wasn't always a Christian stance, like being anti-abortion and pro-life.
Yeah.
The church wasn't always anti-abortion. And I know that's hard to imagine, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't always. It wasn't always conservative. It wasn't always, you know what I'm saying? These are like, it wasn't always like this, but you can't even imagine that. You know what I'm saying? So what Terraform, what I'm trying to do with this book is saying, why can't you imagine that? What happened? Like we'll try to. Well, let's get loose. Let's do some exercises. Let's try to imagine something else. And that's really like what I was hoping to do with the poetry and the art with this book.
So speaking of that, right? Like, talk to me about your process for writing. You've been a writer.
Long time.
I think my mom always told me that a good writer is a good reader.
Right.
Right. I know you've been consuming content. Like, talk to me about this process of like, when do you know what you're writing is going to be? A poem versus a song versus a book? Like, how do you parse that out?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm definitely concept first. And I would add to your mom's axiom, which is true, a good writer is a good reader. I also say a good writer is a good listener, good observer, because I think I'm personally like a slow reader. So a lot of times like it's audiobooks or it's podcasts or it's like, so because I just read slow. But the absorption of ideas and of concept and various ways of thinking about things, various ways of looking at things, and then self-reflection becomes, just like the raw, like periodic table of like what I'm going to write about. But you don't know if it's a poem or a song until you start writing, And then for poetry, I think for me, like, it starts with a really good turn of phrase. Like if I have a really good sentence or a really good turn of phrase, in my mind, I'm like, the poem's done. It's already written. It's just zipped up into that sentence. I can sit it over on the shelf, come back to it later. Like, Dear Board of Education, so are we. Done. The poem's done. You could just, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's in that. I just gotta unpack that at some point. Yeah. In the book, if coffee were a man, it'd be a black man. Poem's done. It's already in it. The sentence is strong enough. You just have to like take your time. And for me, that's when like I start rubbing my hands together. You know what I'm saying? That's the Birdman Cash Money rub where I'm like, all right, here we go. I'll get to it. It's already there. The work's already there. I'm not the artist, I'm the canvas. It's already in it. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of my work is that. It's like, once I already got that, if I got that phrase, if I got that turn of phrase, I'm like, we'll just see how it plays out. But that's really my process. I absorb a lot. And then if I can like get it into like a phrase or a word that is chock full of meaning enough, then I'm like, oh yeah, then it's just a matter of unpacking it.
So you talk about absorbing, you talk about listening. I remember, I told you I've been around. I've been following for a while. I've been around. So I remember when you got excited about Lux's third round.
Yes. The battle, Loaded Lux.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to figure out, like, do you listen to battle rap like that? Are you like a battle rap?
I think I do. I do now. I'm in dad mode recently, so I haven't been keeping up like I wish I could, but I know like who's spitting and who not. Yeah.
So let's talk about it, right? Because like I'm trying to figure out, like I'm curious to get your perspective on like how, if at all, does that influence like your art? Like is that a part of, as you think about like the table of content that you engage?
No, I think for me that's like anybody who watches WWE, it's like this is wrestling, you know what I'm saying? To where I'm like, it's really entertainment. And it's like, it's so far, like that type of battling is so far removed from the battling that I did that I'm like, it's a whole other sport. It's a whole other genre. It's like a boxer watching like UFC to where you're like, this is just, this is different. You know what I mean?
Different.
So I can appreciate it for what it is. But yeah, people have asked me a few times, like, hey man, you ever gonna get back into this thing? I'm like, no, bro. Like,
Into battle
yeah,
rapping?
because I came from it. And I'm
Whoa.
like, nah, this is different.
But this era though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This era is different. I'm like, I'm not battling
Yeah.
these dudes. Like, are you kidding me? No. You know what I'm saying? Like, first of all, I got my title belts. They already hanging. I am not putting that in jeopardy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not putting my legacy in jeopardy, number one. And number two, I'm like, this, like I said, it's a different sport. I'm out here like, I would be like an iPhone 5. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was great for my time. You feel me? But like, yo, these
Right.
mugs are on 5G out here. You know, like I'm not, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like I know my place, you feel me? But I will say what it does for me rather than like writing content, it just keeps me connected to the culture, you know, because as a dad and as somebody like touring, it's easy to like get away from like the pulse of the culture.
Right.
So for me, it's like, that's really the biggest role it plays. It's like, I want to stay connected, like who hot, you know what I'm saying? Who's that young spitter, you know? And then even with just listening to just who's on the streets right now, like who's hot in the streets right now, like what are they talking about, where's music going, just as someone that's just a fan, you know what I mean? And I think that's actually full circle to like the cross movement stuff. Like they would say so much on things about like, oh man, hip hop's evil, this is a means to preach the gospel. And I'm like, I love hip hop. I don't understand. I feel like this is Lord's gift to us. Like hip hop saved my life.
Right.
I don't know what to tell you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I don't know. I love it. You know? So you're tripping. Then why do you rap? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, so again, we're talking a long time ago thinking.
Right.
But
Right.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, I still love the scene. I still love hip hop. So I stay into the battle rap stuff just because I love it, you know?
So that's a good segue, man. Like what, you got some projects coming down the pipeline? Like what's next?
Oh, you know it, man. There's 3 other Terraform EPs. There's one that's being mixed right now. They're named after the sections in the book. So if you get the book, it's like there's 4 sections: the sky, the soil, the people, and the possibility. So the people is already out. So then the next EP is called The Sky.
That's hard, man. Look, Prop, it's been an honor.
Bro,
I appreciate you.
thank you, man.
Look, we consider you a friend of the show. Y'all, listen, the book is called Terraform, Building a Better World. We've been talking to Propaganda.
Yeah.
He goes by Prop. He's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But make sure you check out the book. It's in the show notes. Click the link. Make sure you cop. It's fire. Your mans, they actually sent me a copy.
Yes.
So I was able to like get
Yes.
started. Very excited. And it's very approachable, actually. I was like, which isn't shocking considering like the history of your art, but I appreciate it because sometimes I don't know, man. People be trying to talk over your head. I'm like, man, can you just kind of get to the point, dog? Like people, you know.
Yeah, bro. Like that was one thing, like one of my biggest critiques, the pushback even from the editor was like, let's make sure like they don't want to understand it 5 years from now. Let's understand it now. So I was like, yeah,
now.
Okay. So they really pushed at me to like really massage the stuff. And I'm so glad they did.
All right, Prop. Well, look, man, I want you to take care, man. We're going to talk soon.
All right, family.
Peace. Living Corporate is brought to you by The Leadership Range, a podcast within the Living Corporate Network. Hosted by globally certified and Fortune 500 executive coach and leadership development expert Neil Edwards, The Leadership Range is focused on having real, raw, soulful, and accountable conversations about inclusive leadership, allyship, professional development. Every week is a new episode with new learning and new actions to take on to grow inclusively. Make sure you check out The Leadership Range everywhere you listen to podcasts. And we're back. Hey, I want to thank Propaganda. Thank you so much. Shout out to him and the team. Shout out to Terraform. Make sure you cop the book. The link's in the show notes. All right. Look, it's important that we remember that nothing's going to change systemically without actually engaging systems, right? Like we have to get beyond using these words and not applying them practically, right? So when we say there's systemic problems, that means that there's systemic issues, which means that we have to actually change and engage those systems. And to change those systems, we have to think systemically. We have to be imaginative. We have to be courageous, right? Like And I get it. Like, you know, I'm looking on, you know, LinkedIn, and I see a bunch of folks getting promoted. And like a lot of us, Black folks specifically, and brown folks, like we're in these places that discourage systems thinking. It's easier in a lot of different ways to go along and get along, to play the game. You're playing yourself, but I get it. Play the game, quote unquote. And they hand you your, you know, your 10% raise or your 15% raise maybe, with a, you know, a senior in front of your title, and you've made it, right? But that doesn't actually create systems change. That doesn't impact generations later down the road. It's ego to think that when you get to the top of this system, you're going to change the whole system. That's ego, because there's no history that we have of anybody getting into like a senior position and then changing the game from the inside. Like, that's not a true thing, right? It's just not. I want you to, you know, to receive that, because once you can really appreciate and understand that the systems are broken. So it doesn't matter if we have representational diversity, that doesn't equate to systemic justice or transformation. Yeah, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Audre Lorde, right? We have to engage systems outside of them. We need to create systems and use those systems, against current systems. You beat systems with a system, right? You don't beat systems by trying to fix the system. Anyway, look, it's a hard week. There's going to be a lot of emotions and feelings everyone's going through as we continue to process the Derek Chauvin sentencing. My hope is that you take care of yourself. Let folks know about Living Corporate. Give us a review or 3. Share it with a friend or 5. We'll catch up with you later. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.